Welcome to GONKCAST, an Autechre Podcast. I'm Gabe.
I'm Dan.
And this is yet another bonus episode about your emails. Plus, we'll finish our discussion of Autechre's insanely productive 2018 by taking a look at the 2018 digital single Sinistrail Sentinel. Of course, there's a bit more 2018 material on the release we'll be discussing next episode, the batch of 7 soundboard recordings released as AE Live 2016/2018. I know this isn't the most popular Autechre music ever, but we've barely gotten any emails about it at all, to be honest, and we really want to hear your thoughts. So email us, goncastpod@gmail.com. Again, tell us what you think about AE Live 2016/2018 or anything Autechre related, really, goncastpod@gmail.com. And thanks so much, by the way, to everyone who's written in over the course of this long AE journey. We're sort of nearing the end now, but we'll still have lots of cool odds and ends to talk about. So keep those emails coming. Again, goncastpod@gmail.com. All right, Dan, what background info do we need to know about Sinistrail Sentinel?
Autechre released Sinistrail Sentinel, it's a tongue twister, their first new music after the NTS sessions on December 5th, 2018, as part of the long-running Adult Swim singles series. At first, the track was only available to stream as part of this weird Cobra-themed interactive player on the Adult Swim website, but a high-quality download was eventually made free for anyone who purchased the NTS sessions from the AE store. The album art obviously resembles the NTS sessions, but in place of the numbers 1 and 4 are the letters A and S for Adult Swim. So there's some debate about whether Sinistrail Sentinel is just a loose single or a proper bonus track.
Yeah, in regard to reception, I've honestly had a hard time pinning that down. Lots of fans seem to think of it as a lazy kind of throwaway, but plenty others call it a hidden gem and a highlight of Autechre's entire 2018 output. It's currently sitting at a decent 3.25 out of 5 on Rate Your Music, but I guess we'll just have to decide for ourselves. So on that note, Dan, what did you think of Sinistrail Sentinel?
You know, it's pretty cool. It's very like mechanical and like glitchy, dark. I think it like sort of fits into some of the NTS. Like it kind of sounds like it's from the same time period and all, but it's a neat little single.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like it feels quite dark, honestly, for the NTS sessions. I feel like it would be one of the darker things on that collection, but you're right, it sort of fits. I mean, I have sort of mixed feelings about it because it is quite I don't know how to put this. I mean, it's quite abstract. It's quite like, you've got these like big, like thudding kind of, I don't know, like empty bucket sounds or something. And this kind of like really lush synthy afterglow to these sounds. But then you start to get this like increased, like heavy rumbling groaning, almost like in Volvec, however we decided we would pronounce that territory off of NTS2. Yet it just remains like this kind of weird abstract, like it never like really forms. You know what I'm saying? Like it almost felt like I started to decide that it was like all sound design and very little composition as a track. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with you. That's my biggest like grudge with it is that it never really like finds its footing. It never really like goes anywhere. It almost seems like maybe unfinished or something. Like it's like the rough sketch, like they haven't got to that composition portion yet, maybe.
Yeah, it's like just sounds, and it's like admittedly fascinating sounds. All the stuff that I was describing. It's got this kind of like pounding, tom kind of vibe, like just these big heavy thuds and like these big groans and everything all over the place, and then this kind of like glimmering, icy, droning, sort of like shimmering string work sort of hanging over the top. But yeah, I mean, I almost wrote down that it's like a little, I want to say like proggy. It just has like this weird kind of like, I don't know, when I think of the NTS sessions, I think of like these strange ideas kind of coalescing into a lot of times like a steady groove. It kind of like forms together, and this just feels like the intro or something. I mean, it happens to be 12 minutes, but it feels like it's on its way somewhere, but then it just kind of like peters out.
Yeah. I mean, I agree 100%. It does just sort of never go anywhere. I mean, it's definitely like interesting. The sounds are really cool. I like the the like reverb in it is really neat. But yeah, it's just all sort of academic, it doesn't really, it never has that, a groove never really, pops up or anything. And I think it's even different in like, I could see people saying like, well, Acid Idol or something is sort of the same thing, but I don't think it's Acid Idol and the other, sort of more abstracty, tracks on NTS. I feel like they have, they've worked at that composition a little bit, maybe as little as it may be there. I think it's definitely like much more present than here on Sinistrail. I mean, like I said, it just really feels like, a sketch, or like they haven't, got to that part yet.
Yeah, I feel like honestly that's a good theory. That might be where they start with a lot of tracks, is like the sound of it, and then they kind of form it into something, especially on NTS, which has a kind of a, like I said, a groovy, almost like accessibility to it. And this didn't get there yet. I mean, do you have any thoughts on its relationship to Sinistrail AB Air from NTS2? Maybe even Netlon Sentinel from way back in EP7. I say that sort of jokingly because the title, there's clearly something there, but I don't hear anything going that far back. But, I do feel like Sinistrail AB Air is kind of, it's kind of insane, because you can hear like the exact same kind of, icy like whooshing and, that kind of like synthy droning going on in this track. I mean, it comes straight from here. And yet it honestly kind of sounds like that pounding tom work got like sped up and squashed. So it's now just kind of like these weird squishy, like fluttering noises that are kind of just barely like over the top of Sinistrail AB Air. I mean, do you hear this as like, this was the first draft of what became Sinistrail AB Air?
I don't know if it's like, first draft, or if it's just, they're using the same patches, or maybe not even the same patch, maybe just, the same sound bank or something, and, taking it in a different way or anything. Because you're right, you hear those same sort of sounds, but I don't know, Sinistrail Sentinel sounds like such a sketch, like I was saying, so it seems easy to say like, okay, well then, AB Air is the finished draft or whatever, but I mean it's just not like that close. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's what's funny is like it's not what we were just describing a minute ago, that they, Sinistrail AB Air is like this 2-minute 40-second like kind of interlude-y kind of just whooshing and like these weird squishy sounds over it. So it's not that they took the sounds from Sinistrail Sentinel and like converted it into a well-developed track. They instead like actually, chopped it and squashed it into like this weird, more drifting kind of ambient thing. I want to read this take from listener Joe, who writes, Sinistrail Sentinel sounds like an idea that after working on it as far as they could, they figured it just didn't fit even the wide range of aesthetics that we get on the NTS sessions, and they instead took the ambient elements and used them in Sinistrail AB Air. This bonus track is one of the best counters to the lazy anti-NTS argument that the album is just a grab bag of random odds and ends they had lying around to fill up an 8-hour cash grab. The song just wouldn't have worked with the overall feel of the NTS sessions. It's far more raw and feels like it would be much more at home on LSEC than here. It really drove home to me just how smooth the NTS sessions are than LSEC and XI, even at its most aggressive and raw moments. Yeah, I feel like I'm sort of torn here, because we're talking about it, and this is what it sounds like to me, as like this kind of early draft of something, and they decided either that it didn't fit or that they wanted to just use a little nugget of it for a interlude kind of purpose on NTS2. But I mean, is that how you hear it? What the listener's describing here?
Yeah, I think the listener did a pretty good job describing it here. It does sort of feel like, maybe that's why it is kind of the first draft or whatever. An abandoned idea, maybe more than a first draft. Like, they felt like it wasn't going to fit in the aesthetic of NTS. And I mean, like you said, I agree, it is like sort of more dark than the other ones. So yeah, maybe those elements they took from it and used in Air, maybe that is the way they did fit it in there. You know what I mean? It's hard to say, like, without actually like knowing their process or anything. But I do agree, it does sound like a bit more at home on LSEC NTS here.
Yeah. I mean, I want to say that because of like the weird abstractness and the darkness to it, certainly. But at the same time, I do feel like the sound palette here is the same sound palette that we get on a lot of NTS2, and yet it's just like way too abstract to really make sense on NTS2 or any NTS session. And I'm just fascinated and kind of perplexed by what they ended up doing with it, which is like, it feels like, okay, they agree it wouldn't fit on what they were trying to accomplish with any of the sessions and NTS2 specifically, but then they were like, but I like it enough that I want to use a 2-minute clip of it. Isn't that like so weird?
I mean, yeah, but it might not even be that, oh, I like a 2-minute clip of it. It might be, this sound bank I really enjoy, which, that makes some sense, And I mean, we're assuming that this one came first and Sinistral Air came second. It very well could have been the other way around. I mean, I don't think it sounds that way, but who are we to say?
Yeah, I mean, instead of squashing all those like empty bucket sounds, they could have actually like blown them out so that it was like bigger and more booming. That's true. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Joe's other point that like this is good evidence of, you can just imagine there's tons of this kind of stuff in their vaults. And they were quite selective about what actually ended up on each NTS session. So, final verdict, is Sinistrail Sentinel a must-hear track? Should people go so far as to like end it, add it to the end of their NTS playlist? It's like, should be that last bonus track on every time you listen?
No, definitely not. Don't add it to the. I hate bonus tracks. First off, when they're stuck on a record. But I mean, All End is the obvious closer for NTS, and having something after that would be ridiculous, so definitely do not do that. As for the first question, is it as good as anything else? No. I think it's interesting. It's worth, if you're listening to this podcast, you're a big enough fan that it's worth seeking out. It's easy to find, it's on the like official Adult Swim SoundCloud thing. Check it out. It's worth hearing. But it's in no way like essential or anything like that. I think it's just, it's more of an argument for, they like really need another one of these collections, like collecting all the EPs and Lucy's and stuff, because I mean, even in their most throwaway, like this track, maybe, it's still like very interesting and worth hearing, I think,
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I was like a little disappointed by it. I think I kind of skipped over this because I just like looked at the title and thought, for sure it must just be one of the tracks on the NTS sessions, and
yeah, I can see that.
I just sort of like never got around to it. And then when I listened to it this week, I was just kind of like, oh, it feels kind of like unfinished. And yet it ended up making me kind of like Sinistrail AB Air more, because in my head canon, they like squashed and condensed this thing into that little interlude. And I'm like, I can't believe all this shit is buried in that, what I thought was just a little, ominous whoosh. It's actually quite a complex thing. But okay, let's move on to the emails. We'll start with some NTS stuff. Listener Marius commented on YouTube to say, call me crazy, but the gonk sound and gonk steady one always sounded eerily familiar. And I realized it's kind of similar in tone to the dubby stabs in Garbage Mix 36. Also, the tempo and general vibe / tonal palette is quite similar as well in a way. Would it be a stretch to think that the guys reimagined or even reused some elements here to make a sort of Garbage Mix 2018? Listener Jordan also wrote in to say that the track 6 of 8 from Session 2 turns into Recury. And on top of that, we got a lot of emails comparing NTS material to much earlier tracks. I'm not sure if you've got specific thoughts on any of these examples in particular, but when listening to NTS, do you ever feel like the guys are returning to much earlier material, or do you just take Sean at his word that nothing predates Blade of Loris?
I mean, I always wanted to take him at his word, like why would you lie about that? But also maybe it's not so much a lie, and maybe it's just a misremembering or a mistake, because I mean, yeah, I off the top of my head, I can't say if I agree with the listener or not on those, but I mean, I've heard that from similar things from other people and other comments and stuff online. maybe it's just, I mean, maybe it's not so much like they used an old patch or something like, but maybe it's they used a synth preset or a sound, a sample or something from something that is very early.
Yeah, I mean, when I was reading these emails, and then I was thinking about stuff like Column 13, right, which sounds an awful lot like the Oversteps era, or it at least started there or something. I do get like very suspicious of Sean's claim that like the oldest thing is some jam out of Blade of Loris. I've read I can't remember when it was exactly. I want to say it was like XI. They kind of noted in some interview that like they will often start with some like old preset, kind of like you were describing, or like some sort of older unused thing or something, and then just sort of like riff off of it. And I just have no doubt with like the wealth of material that they're putting out over the course of the 2010s that they are not quite often like returning to older things as a starting point, maybe even if it never got turned into anything. Or like, you also got to imagine a lot of the stuff on the NTS sessions started as like stuff intended for a live performance.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like not necessarily they were working on an album track or something. But I don't know, I just sort of decided after thinking about this that I do not believe Sean, and I do think that a lot of this stuff, and he might not be lying, but it's just like the original idea was like all the way back in 2005 or something, and then worked on it a little bit more in 2008. Messed with it a little bit more in 2010, so on and so on. I feel like there's got to be a lot of that stuff going on here. But all right, what's next?
All right, listener Joe says, I would love to hear if you have any theories on what the track titles might mean. Casual, Air, and Idle show up in a bunch of track names and seem to describe something about the track itself, especially since there's both an Air and a casual version of Shrimp Ripple. Obviously, there's no way to know if any of these actually mean anything, but since you guys have listened to the full album a gajillion times, I'd be curious to hear if you've come up with any theories. I also like how listener Jordan wrote in to ask Dummy Casual Part 2, where is the first one?
Yeah, I mean, it's another, I feel like, a lot of the emails we got this week were actually tough questions that we couldn't possibly answer, but it's fun to think about. And I also kind of want to put out there, so if any listeners have any, deep thoughts about this stuff, GONKCASTpod@gmail.com, let us know. But did you find yourself thinking about this and coming up with any theories about what these kind of repeating, track descriptors mean?
Well, I definitely thought about it, and casual always, like, again, maybe it's just in my head, but the casual ones always seemed like that's a real kind of laid back groove.
I almost wanted to say that like those are the ones that they put on while they're doing stuff around the house or something. They sound like these kind of like
that's
eternal, would never have to end tracks, except Dummy Casual doesn't sound like that to me at all.
True. Yeah. Casual was the one I feel like I came closest to maybe figuring out, and that it had that laid back feel. Air, it's sort of
They're airy.
Yeah,
all of the Air tracks are quite airy.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. So maybe, but I mean that seems a little too on the nose. Idle, it's easy, like in Acid When Idle or whatever. I think the idle there is fairly like self-explanatory. But what's the other idle? I don't have the track listing in front of me.
It's just Stipple Idle, like the sort of part 2 of Turbile Epic Casual. You know how there's just like that like 2-minute little. One of our listeners compared it to like whips and stuff going off at the end of a.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'd use idle to describe. So we'll never figure it out. But as for Dummy Casual Part 2, I did remember when I was listening to it, the first couple times, I was like, oh, I like came to the realization that Part 1 is not on here,
Yeah, I mean, I think about it a lot. I mean, I just have like these sort of random theories. I mean, I feel like they really are just descriptors, and I feel like a lot of Autechre tracks are not as like, especially in this era, let's say, are like just not as deep as we want to think they are. Like they're literally describing some kind of preset or like patch, like almost in a literal way or something, and that they're like little descriptors about maybe the vibe or the mood of it or something, and that just seems like the best bet to me.
Yeah, I agree with him.
So Joe also wrote, I can't wait to find out if you named the podcast after Gonk Steady 1 and Gonk Tough High, or if you're just referencing how it's used as a half-joking term by Autechre fans on Reddit and elsewhere. So which is it? Why do we name the podcast GONKCAST?
I think you came up with it. So I don't know. I guess I can't answer that. You came up with it.
Yeah, no, it was definitely just because of the jokes about gonking. I feel like it's a good title because if you see that, like you know, and you recognize the joke, then you listen to enough Autechre to like this podcast.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's kind of it's not. I think it's nice when you can put a little title. It's like, you know, this is for the like real nuts, like the Autechre nuts. You have to be kind of nuts to get the joke.
Exactly. And when you said that, I had the idea. I made the artwork, and I had the idea, and it would fit very well. So I think that's basically why I went with it.
Yeah, just worked. But yeah, shout out to those two great Gonk tracks. Okay, listener Jordan shared this neat narrative description of NTS4 saying, NTS4 reminds me of what Incunabula was going for. On the Designers Republic site, it described Incunabula as having a theme of humanity versus technology, and your description of NTS4 being the sound of machines taking over was what I was thinking. The album sounds like it has a really strong death of humanity narrative. Frame Casual is like the actual destruction, like an evil AI system setting off nuclear explosions. Everything's exploding and the machines are all failing. Mirage is like the aftermath. Everything burnt down. Everything's quiet because everyone is dead. Column 13, the machines are reconstructing everything and rebuilding the planet. Shim Ripple Casual, everything real has been replaced by something artificial. Fake trees, fake plants, fake animals, fake everything. No conscious life, just fake everything. All end is the end result. It's the new normal. All life has come to an end. All end is the sound of order, the sound of peace, a type of bliss that would have been impossible as a living mortal. I mostly just wanted to read that because I liked it a lot, but I did want to ask you about this related email from listener Sean, who writes, overall, the strength of this sequence puts NTS4 toward the top of the sessions for me. It's just a shame that I'm not really feeling Frayne Casual. If Frayne was swapped with another heater like Clustro or Ninefly, for example, it would hold up as a perfect standalone piece for me. So what do you think? Like, what do you think would happen to NTS4? You know, we just heard that like great, you know, nice narrative arc from listener Jordan, but like, what would happen to it if it started off with like a slightly more of a bang? You know,
I think NTS4 really sort of has a perfect sequencing already. You know, we droned on about it on the last episode. I don't think it would start out great with a, you know, real banger. I really think it's perfect how it is. You know, it does have sort of a narrative. You know, I'm not as imaginative as that listener, but you know, I mean, it does like lend itself to coming up with those sorts of you know, ideas and stuff like the listener wrote in. And I think that would change a bit if it started with something, you know, more upbeat, more banging, you know? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the two tracks that listener mentions, like Cluster Casual and Ninefly, are not like, you know, real heaters. They're like pretty mellow, but they are quite rhythmic. And I kind of feel like Ikarai just is that. You know, we talked about how Ikarai kind of like ends on this to be continued sort of note.
Yeah.
And even though it's like a nice conclusion for NTS3 and then Frayne Casual is a nice beginning for NTS4, I feel you could just think of Ikarai as the first track of NTS4 if you really want like something a little more rhythmic and a little more moving to kind of kick things off. You know what I mean? It almost feels like, you know, it's different from LSEC in the sense that like you don't have to go straight into the next session or anything. It's like going to be perfectly satisfying ending between sessions, but that kind of works, you know what I mean? It kind of like, it cools out, but it stays pretty rhythmic with Ikarai, and then we're in the much more ambient territory with Frayne Casual, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I like the to be continued thing, like you said, because it's sort of like, and I think we made this analogy, it's like a trilogy, you know, a movie trilogy. You know, the second one comes out, and then it's not like tomorrow the next movie comes out. You know, you got to wait a year, 2 years, whatever. And so it lends itself to like, you know, something's coming, but you could take a break. You can listen to it, you know, next week, or, you know, you could listen to it in an hour, you know, later. I think NTS 3 into 4 is like so perfect that I wouldn't want to touch anything.
Yeah. And honestly, like thinking back about it, you know, like LSEC 5 starts off with Pendaloo Casual. There's another casual for you. And that's like a very minimalist, but still kind of like it's got like a beat, it's got a kick and a snare and everything, and it's kind of like, riding along like this very minimalist techno, like super minimalist techno. And Frank Casual, like I said on the episode, it's like, it's quite rhythmic. It's like all these sort of pieces like being sort of moved into rhythmic territory. It just doesn't have like a big low end kick or anything like that, so it doesn't feel like drums, you know what I mean? But it's quite a percussive piece. I feel like it kind of does accomplish what this listener wishes it would, and I just honestly love it. So what's next?
All right, another one from listener Jordan. They say, when you talked about how people were mad about All In, it made me think of Barnett Newman's Who's Afraid of Red painting. It was a painting that made people angry over a seemingly simple painting with red, yellow, and blue. People got so mad over it, so angry that someone vandalized it. People thought that the painting was so simple that anyone could have done it, but they couldn't. No one could restore it properly. There was just so much going on, the layers, the shade of red, the sheen, the texture, not easy to replicate. This is the same thing. It's assumed that because it's an hour long, it's just a lazy drone recording, but it's an actual song with different parts, different sections, much variation. That other hour-long track, like track Perlance, is like a simple, pleasant-looking artwork you would hang in your house. It looks pretty, and sometimes you want something simple to accent a room, just something nice to look at. All In is like a simple, minimalist painting that turns out to have nuances when you look closer.
Yeah, so I'll put the link in the show notes because it was just sort of like an interesting thing. But this Barnett Newman painting, Who's Afraid of Red, Yellow, and Blue? It's like a painting series. Did you sort of look over that Wikipedia page and this whole story of vandalism and everything?
Yeah, I knew a little bit about it, but I did read the whole thing. Yeah, it's interesting, and I like the listeners' email. It does have a decent parallel to it, because I think All In is like that minimalist paint. People think like with Rothko and stuff like, oh, it's just a big color. Anyone could have done it, but that's the thing. When you see it in a book, it does just look like a canvas that's painted black or red or whatever. Yeah. But when you see it in person, there's all these like textures and sheen. It's the same thing with like Pollock. Pollock like kind of looks a little stupid in a book. It just looks messy. But when you see one in person, you could see the footprints and the the cigarette burns and everything. There's all these little tiny things that really interesting. Those are like some of the best things to just sit and take a long time like to look at in a gallery. And I think All In and a lot of like minimalist music is that same way. Like, it has like when you deep listen to it, you hear, the loop changed a little bit right here, or the phasing of the two loops like came up in a way that hasn't been coming up before, and stuff. And I definitely think that is in a very similar vein.
Yeah, I mean, I love the comparison, and I had never heard of this painting series before, and it's just such a like hilarious story because it's like, basically just like a giant thing of red with like a little line of blue and yellow on some of them, and it's just like, I guess people were annoyed at how stupid and simple it was, so it got slashed up by some vandal, and then trying to restore it, it made everybody angry because they say they didn't restore it right. Like, it wasn't just red. There was actually a lot of nuance to it.
The best part was the guy just literally used house paint.
Yeah,
I liked
to restore it because he was like, it's just red, But what's funny about it is like, maybe it was just red, because All In has this kind of quality where it's like, you hear changes and you sort of question like, did I really hear that? Or, you know what I mean? Like, am I playing tricks on myself because I've been focusing on the same thing? Actually, I feel like that's a huge part of the fun. I do think there's tons of nuance and tons of changes, the way we described like for a long ass time in the last episode. But it is still kind of fun to be like, has it changed or am I, hallucinating?
No, I mean, I definitely agree with that, and I think the listener sort of implied that Perlance like doesn't really change, and I agree with that. Perlance is much more like stationary, but that can have like a similar effect. When you listen to essentially a loop or something for an hour, or stare at something that really maybe doesn't have much layer, and so maybe truly is just red house paint. You do, your mind like like has to create some sort of variance, or you'll go crazy. It is like sort of fun to figure out like is it you? Is it your mind? Is it, what is it? But yeah, I mean, I love all this stuff.
I think All End has both. It has like the am I just hallucinating, but also there's a lot going on. It's like I think a brilliant piece of minimalist work. But on the topic of artwork, listener Phil had this to share. The artwork during this era went in an interesting direction. Autechre's other artwork, the covers with subjects and stuff, not so much tri-rep, LP5, etc., seemed to be representations of the sound of the music. Right around XI, when their music started to take on the jaggedness of their 2010 sounds, the artwork started to seem more like approximations of the music instead of direct representations. Man, I really don't have the art vocabulary for this, but here it goes. If the old art were photographs of the sound, this era's artwork was stick figures. It's like the sound became so alien and otherworldly that the closest visual representation would just be black and white blobs and jagged lines, in the way that our cave-dwelling ancestors could only represent buffalo by finger painting. What do you think of this theory and this kind of like the development of Autechre's, visual style?
Yeah, I mean, I get what the listeners saying. From XI on, it does become like so otherworld. Amber, is I think the easiest one. It's that picture of that, right. Cliff or whatever.
Stuff like Confield and Draft and Untilted. These feel like they are trying to kind of visually represent what the thing sounds like.
Exactly. But I think it is like, how do you represent what NTS sounds like or LSEC sounds like without just going the machine route over and over. I think it's easy to just go like the robot route over and over, which maybe like Confield or Draft or something like hints at. I think I've said it on the podcast, but this like section really from XI on is my favorite artwork of Autechre. Like I love the NTS artwork and the LSEC and the AE Live a lot. I think it is a good representation in the sense that music is very hard to represent. Yeah,
it's like unrepresentable. I mean, I feel like that's how I started to feel. I was thinking about this because I was kind of like, okay, it doesn't exactly work because like this listener sort of skipped over like tri-repete and LP5 and stuff, which would kind of otherwise complicate the theory that there's like some trajectory going on. And I just started thinking like, in a way, the artwork of the 2010s, especially like XI and LSEC, is kind of similar to tri-repete and LP5, but like more successful in a weird way, because it felt like those covers were almost trying to just like say nothing, like just take the music like at face value, like there's just nothing to look at even. And something like XI or LSEC, it almost accomplishes that better, because I don't even know how to articulate this, but like it's more nothing than nothing to actually just put a couple shapes. You know what I mean? It's like when you put nothing, I start thinking, well, what did they mean by nothing?
Yeah,
when you just put a couple shapes.
Then
you
it's look like for something in the absence.
Yeah, the shapes, I know that they mean nothing. I know they're just circles and squares. You know what I mean? So it's like it somehow accomplishes what like tri-repete was trying to do in just like an even more profound way.
No, I totally get you. Tri-repete, you try to think like, what does just the brown olive color, like what does that represent, when like,
and it has the same minimalist thing where you're like, am I seeing changes in the tone if I look real close?
Exactly. I know I always bring up Phil Nyblock on this podcast, but he has an album, it's called Nothing to Look At, Just a Record, and the cover like just says that, it's one of the best album titles and album covers ever.
Yeah, I almost feel like some of these like 2010s Autechre albums could just have that as the cover. It would like sort of work the same. And then the NTS sessions is similarly like gives you nothing. But
it's just like literally
these are sessions.
Yeah, it's just literally in like almost the font of like a 80s computer, like a LED display kind of thing of like,
it's kind of similar
this is what it is.
It's kind of similar to LP5 actually, which is like that plastic from a CD case, and it's just like, this is a CD. It's like all it's saying to you.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is music is basically what that says.
Yeah.
But all right, what's next?
All right. Next one's from listener Daniel, which I assume is a different Daniel than myself. They say, I was curious what each of your guys' physical Autechre collections look like. I know you guys mentioned owning the EP's box set. So do either of you own other Autechre CDs, vinyl records, etc.?
Yeah. I don't think either of us own the EP's box set. I think we were just saying we've like spent many a listening session with it over the years. You don't own it, do you?
No.
So and I don't own anything. I don't own any physical like media anymore in my life. It's a dream of mine to one day sort of start a collection. Maybe when I live in a bigger place one day, like maybe if Dogecoin takes off or something, I'll be able to buy a nice like setup and get every Autechre album on vinyl. But that's for later. What are you on though?
Yeah, I don't buy CDs at all. I got rid of all my CDs years ago. I do buy a lot of vinyl records, but I mostly buy like used older stuff. I can justify the price of. I do have the NTS box set, and I have like the Tortoise Autechre split that I found at a record store. I think when I was getting married, like that weekend. But otherwise, no. I mean, Autechre vinyl, I would love to own it all, but it's very expensive, and most of it came out, when I was a child and did not have money to buy Autechre records on.
You didn't order Sign and Plus?
No, I actually haven't yet, mostly because of this podcast. I've been trying to like sort of distance myself from Sign and Plus. We listened to it a little bit, did those like brief, episodes on it, but I honestly have not like totally sunk my teeth into it yet because of this podcast. So now that I'm vaccinated, I'll probably go to the record store soon, and I'll probably pick them up once I'm there for use in the podcast. Can I write that off on my taxes?
Yeah, I guess so, maybe. All right. Listener Jack says, you talked about vocal samples in Deco Lock, and I just wanted to share my theory about their origin. There are a few songs by Venetian Snares where he sings, and I think his voice sounds just like the second vocal sample in Deco Lock, the one that people think is David Bowie. If you want to hear his singing voice, some tracks he sings on are She, a cover of a Misfits song, Horsey Noises, 1,000 Years, My Love is a Bulldozer, Amazon, and Too Far Across. They might have sampled one of his songs, but he actually is pretty close with Autechre as far as I know. They played a few shows together in Canada during their last tour, so maybe it's even an original recording that he did for them. I don't know. Kind of just wanted to put this out there in case it like stimulates any other listeners to make that connection. But I know you listen to a lot of Venetian Snares. I don't know if you've listened to much of his singing, but what do you think about that theory?
Yeah, I can't think of it off the top of my head if it sounds similar or not. I'll definitely go check it out. Especially, I didn't know he covered She, that Misfits song. I love the Misfits, so I'll definitely check that out.
All right. Well, write in if you have any ideas. GONKCASTpod@gmail.com. What's next?
Listener Tom, they say, I was surprised to find many people are lukewarm on ELYC6 Onset. I think it's a phenomenal track, absolutely alive and fizzing with an inconceivable variety of organic energy. It reminds me of this quote by Darwin, who writes, "It is interesting to contemplate a tangled bank clothed with many plants of many kinds, with birds singing on bushes, with various insects flitting about, and with worms crawling through the damp earth. Considering the best generative nature of these tracks, the continuation of the quote also resonates. These elaborately constructed forms, so different from each other and dependent upon each other in so complex a manner, have all been produced by laws acting around us. From so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been and are being evolved."
I like that quote a lot, like in the context of Autechre, and I just thought like this would be a really intellectual episode if we're talking about like Barnett Newman paintings, we're talking quoting some Darwin. That's kind of rad, isn't it?
Yeah, I like that a lot.
It does make me think of Autechre. Tom also shared this cool clip of Autechre playing Bleefeel off of Peel Session 2 at Coachella in 1999, where they drop in Rakim's vocals from Microphone Fiend. I'll put this clip in the show notes as well. But what did you think about hearing that? And does it like kind of make you more excited about the idea we've talked about many times of Autechre doing some kind of actual hip hop collaboration one day?
Well, I would like that collaboration, with somebody like specifically working with them. Young Thug would be really cool. Danny Brown, some of these crazy people. I didn't love this clip. I thought it sort of felt a little forced. It was also a little. It's like a famous song. It was a little annoying, It just made me think. I don't know. I don't think it flowed that well, and I'm not the biggest fan of the vocal samples in Autechre work, and I didn't. I was disappointed in it, honestly.
Wow. I mean, I found it kind of like mind blowing in a weird way because Bleefield, it wasn't one of our favorite tracks off of the Peel session too.
Yeah, that too.
And but then there's like, it makes this, I don't know, the transition into the vocal part on this live performance. And yeah, it's a famous song, but it's a fun thing to do, I think, like at a Coachella type setting. And the transition into it is like mind boggling. Like it's just insane the way it like sort of skips a beat and like shifts into it. And then it sounds like the vocals are like not synced up somehow at first. Like it doesn't sound right based on the way you hear Bleefield. And then I started to think like, wait, is this how they hear the beat of Bleefield? Because it like makes a weird sense. It just sounds off, like lined up incorrectly. And then when I start like focusing on the vocals, it like recontextualizes the beat. And I'm thinking like, is this how Sean and Rob hear it? You know what I mean? And then it started to make me wonder like, I don't think a rap collaboration will ever work because there's no rapper that would like hear it the same way they do, you know?
Yeah, I didn't think of that, of them hearing it, that other way. Because at first I hear it the way where it sounds wrong, and just it's a live performance, so it's like, yeah, if you like sort of study it, you could see that it's not really wrong, but who wants to do that at a concert? But I didn't think about that. They might just hear it in that, that might be, it's like that, those pictures where it's like, do you see a vase or two ladies? It's like that kind of thing.
Because the beats are always like pretty weird, and you kind of can like tap your foot to it or like kind of move to it, but you like can't even like make your brain like figure out where the one is and where the snare should be and stuff like that. And it's just like when they drop in this rap, you're like, oh, like is that what they were trying to do? And it's just like, I don't know, it's kind of like exciting. So do check out that YouTube video. I'll put it in the show notes again. All right. Lastly, we got a bunch of emails from listeners with ideas about artists we might consider covering after we've milked Autechre's discography as much as possible. A lot of these listeners also wrote in to suggest that we talk about the remixes, Guestcom, influences on Autechre, certain bootlegs, et cetera, and have no fear, we will do all of that stuff. Listener Joe also suggested that we do some lists like favorite songs, best openers and closers, etc. And I think we'll definitely do that kind of stuff as well. Oh yeah, and listener Jordan shared his own compilation of newer Autechre tracks that would form a modern amber, which I want to talk about in more detail later, but is another like kind of the silly kind of things that we might try. But okay, in regard to other artists, sometime down the road, listener Ellen suggested Boards of Canada, Godspeed You, Black Emperor, Nurse with Wound, and Aphex Twin. Listener Joe suggested Brian Eno, Richard D. James, Boards of Canada, and Pansonic. Listener Andy suggested Boards of Canada, Aphex Twin, One O Tricks Point Never, and Steely Dan. Listener Mike suggested Venetian Snares, Drexcia, Aphex Twin, Boards of Canada, Plaid, and Square Pusher, as well as some single album ideas from short-lived groups like Phoenicia's Brownout and Inoma's Militon Verka. And listener Jordan suggested King Crimson and 9 Inch Nails. Any of these sound interesting to you?
Well, definitely not 9 Inch Nails. I'm vetoing that one right away.
I genuinely like 9 Inch Nails, and Dan just hates them.
Yeah. I love a lot of those bands. Godspeed You, Black Emperor is one of my favorites. I love Pansonic. Pansonic, I think, would be maybe the closest to Autechre, in style and stuff, and would be a lot of fun to go through. In depth like this. But really, a lot of these would be great. Boards of Canada. Nurse with Wound would be kind of fun. Aphex Twin, I feel like there's probably already an Aphex Twin podcast.
Yeah, but it's hard because he's another one with like a discography where like every album is fascinating to talk about, like not all of these artists have that same kind of, I don't want to call it consistency, but just like it's worth thinking about every single release he's put out.
Like One O Tricks Point Never. I like some of his records, but I like the past couple and all. There's not much to talk about there. I think. Or
like Venetian Snares, you would, not every album is worth. Like,
no. I like him, but a lot of it is maybe too similar. Sound. It would just be, a lot of us saying this song sounds fast.
Yeah. I think out of these, Pansonic gets me excited. I know that's not like their fan base is probably even smaller than Autechre by quite a lot. Drexcia, I think, is so awesome, and they have like an incredibly confusing discography, but like one that would be kind of fun to hash out. But they don't like really evolve like a whole ton over their fairly short career. Square Pusher, I feel like, I know you don't like him as much as me, but he's another one that I feel like I don't want to say every album, but like 90% of his albums and releases are like interesting to talk about. The way I was just describing.
He would be a fun one. I like him. I've just never really like gotten super into him. Like I put a Square Pusher on now and then. I like what's it, Hard Normal Daddy, I think it's called, which is the worst album title ever. But I like that record. I've just never really like. I don't think I've ever given him like a completely fair shake, which is strange because I think every record of his I've heard, I've at least enjoyed. That one would be fun.
He gets like really weird, like because he gets like real into the. I mean, there's always like a jazzy element, but it's like he starts to get like really focused on the kind of like fusion era Miles Davis type of shit, and goes even into like almost entirely like live instrumentation kind of like arrangements and stuff. And so I don't know. He's one that I do get sort of excited when I think about. But I don't know if listeners have any ideas about discographies we should do a deep dive on again after we've had tons more fun with Autechre's discography, write us, gonkcastpod@gmail.com. Okay, so that's it. I just wanted to shout out real quick listener Torin, who shared this essay by Sam Byers called "An Album Can Last a Day" about the NTS sessions. I'll just throw this in the show notes as well. I know we didn't talk about it directly, but it was an awesome read and definitely gave us new ways to think about NTS while we were doing those episodes. And lastly, there were number of comments and emails that we didn't get to today, but we will. As you probably have noticed, every single one of these listener email episodes is like twice as long as we intend it to be. So look out for that later on.
All right. Yeah, I think our original idea was for these to be like 20 minutes or something. All right. Well, if you've got any Autechre opinions or hot takes you want to share, we want to hear them. GONKCASTpod@gmail.com. Next episode in a week, AE Live 2016-2018. So again, send us your thoughts on those. GONKCASTpod@gmail.com. If you like the show, help us out. Subscribe. Leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. Look us up on YouTube. Stay connected. Twitter, Instagram. Those are @GONKCASTpod. And we'll see you next time.
See ya.